I've had a few conversations with a couple of teachers over the last few weeks since our last meeting on proficiency scales. As you all know, we started 18 months ago, 12 months ago, however long it was, 18 months probably, on learning goals and success criteria, displaying them every single lesson. We've described to you how we've moved away to that, and we're now in this other phase where perhaps your learning goals and success criteria are running across a number of lessons. In some subjects, maybe you're still doing individual ones for every single lesson, that's fine. But what we need you to know is this middle phase where we are now, it's not the end goal. And so that's what we're going to talk to you about today. We're basically guiding you through the stages, so we're not going straight to stage 3 because we need to make sure we're doing stage 2 effectively before we move on. So while some people might say, I want to be just at stage 3, just tell me what I have to do in the end game, we actually want everyone to work through the process together. So we're going to go into that in a little bit more depth this morning, so you know where we've come from, where we're going, and where we are right now. And then before you leave today, I'm going to give you this reading, which describes basically the end goal. We talked about giving this to you from the beginning, but it is quite heavy and we didn't want people to jump straight to this last page here. What I've done in the photocopy is, as Alex has said before, this is based on the American system. And so what I've done is I've crossed out the numerical values and put in what we're calling them, so advanced, proficient, developing and beginning. And I've also crossed out all the 0.5s just so everyone has clarity and they can refer to these as they go through. And that's it from me. I'm going to flick through, Alex.
So stage 1, where we started, as we know, we've referred to this before, sorry, my back, was we looked at the learning goals and success criteria. We looked at it as it was first presented to us by Mark about, go into a lesson and have a learning goal, they're ready for a lesson. So that was where we started from. We've moved now to stage 2, which is where we're looking at realistic staging of parts of units. So if you've got 3 or 4 lessons that go together naturally to address a particular objective, then that's the learning goal will be across those 3 or 4 lessons, maybe a week, or however long is natural for it to service that. And you'll have a success criteria written for that, which will be effectively a proficiency scale. When I say proficiency scale, I'm using that term and success criteria interchangeably, because for success criteria, eventually what we'll do is we'll be just writing the scale. That'll be how we address that. So a learning goal or success criteria can cover logical subunit groups of lessons. It may overlap. So I've got an example here where learning goal success criteria, one that you've written might be for most of a fortnight to complete, where students are presenting detailed research summary. So the learning goal might cover all of that process, but you might also have a learning goal that's specifically for you and for your students to judge how well they're going at maybe looking critically at information that they get from the internet. So those things will overlap, and you'll be addressing those sort of at the same time, although you'll be specifically focusing on this when you're in those lessons. So you get the idea. So it's obviously break it down into subunits and know that some of them will overlap. And sometimes what will happen is you'll take a success criteria, proficiency scale, and in one particular lesson you might only be looking at one level of it because you've just started, so you might be starting at the developing level with the students just learning formulas if it's maths, or learning the rules or processes, etc. Okay, so yeah. Now, so stage 3, this is where we're headed to probably going into next year, is that we're really going to be looking at a whole of unit proficiency scale. And I'll show you what that looks like in a moment, just as an example, which then gets broken down into the bits that we're doing right now. So we're doing the bits that you naturally do for teaching a particular segment of a lesson or a section of a unit, which might be several lessons. But what we're going to aim for is when we document our whole unit or our whole topic, you'll have a proficiency scale that will cover off on all of that, and that'll be the bit that goes into Atlas. You'll also maybe have 3 or 4 other of your main sub-unit, multi-lesson learning goals, like on the documents that you're going to use day to day, and you can just attach those to the atlas. You don't need to redo those. Whatever you're generating now, you'll just attach those. I'm not going to ask you to copy and paste those across. So what we're aiming for is big picture proficiency scale, the atlas, I'm in the process of reviewing the atlas template to make it shorter and also make it make more sense, so that it serves us better than the existing one. And then you'll have the other ones like the ones you're doing right now, which is the sub-unit learning goals. So what does it look like? I've taken a big unit which is looking at perimeter area and surface area. I'll just point, as you probably can't read most of that. So I've got perimeter area, surface area and volume, and this part just looks at week 3 of a term where I'm looking at periods 2 to 4 during the week, so there's 2 or 3 lessons worth of stuff here. And all I'm doing here in my proficiency, I'm looking at side lengths, perimeters, areas and surface area, because I'm not doing volume in this part. I'm going to handle that as a logical unit in the next week. So I've got definitions as what do I consider to be proficient, and proficient is that students can find side lengths, perimeters, areas, surface areas of shapes and solids by applying specifically Pythagoras' theorem and nets. So my students are going to be practicing that over the 2 or 3 lessons that this unit looks at. How do I judge whether a student is developing? A student is developing if they can remember something, write it down, maybe put the numbers in, maybe get an answer, but maybe not solve the bigger problems where you've got maybe a triangle that's joined onto a rectangle with a sector cut out of it or something, like those compound shapes. So this means that students can apply simple and complex elements of what I'm teaching my kids to do. Simple and complex is the proficient level, right? So that's what we're calling our standard. This means that they can handle all of the simple stuff that I've shown them, but they might need some support or might have major errors in the more complex material. So the student can remember the formula and use it, but maybe not be able to apply it to a more complex shape, that sort of thing, because that's in this layer here. Okay? So that's one of them. The next one is like the same thing for the next week. Next week after that, I'm going to specifically handle volume. It's still in the same unit, but this is another sub thing, and I've written here, in addition to developing level, blah, 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 these students are going to find volume of simple and compound solids by applying addition and subtraction of parts of volumes, prism sphere and part sphere volume formula. So they've got to be able to apply that to a range of things. Now, if they can remember the formula, they can remember the rule, if they can show you part of the process, then they're back down here, and that explains that there, okay? So kids can do all the simple stuff, which just means you gave them a rule, you gave them a technique, they can tell you about it, but they might have difficulty applying it in the things that you teach them that you consider to be a little bit more complex. Okay? Now, if the student can go from there and make judgments and apply to unknown or unforeseen or maybe bigger projects, then you're talking about that advanced level. Obviously, you're looking for that as well. So that's to do with application, really. And that means different things in different subjects. Okay, so they're the 2 bits that I've put together, and that's the equivalent to what we've sort of been looking at. But if we go to the next one, then this is a unit level goal. This is the thing that goes into Atlas, but effectively it's those 2 things put together as the unit, but in one document or one table. Okay, so it looks like this. So all I've done is I've compounded those so that it just makes sense for the whole of that unit, which is covering off on the perimeter, the area, the surface area, and the volume part. That's the whole unit that I'm doing. That's my topic. Okay. So how will I tell whether it's proficient? Well, there's just those things that are in both of those basically put together, and that's what ends up in Atlas. So it's not extra sort of creation, but it's just a matter of putting them together so they make sense in one unit. Same thing here. It looks lots of words. It's just the 2 sets of learning goals that you've been doing now, just basically put together so that it will make sense and flows. And that gives you the guidance right the way through the unit. I've also gone over here and I've just started to put a column, when I'm doing it, I put a column in here, so where am I going to get a resource for the students to know that they practice this and therefore they're at that level? That might be exercise books, that might be sheets, that might be activities you give them, etc., etc. It could be links to websites or whatever. So that's just about it. And up here I've also got my cognitive verbs listed out here. And for mathematics, I'm using calculate, but I've also told the kids you might see the word find or determine or work out because we use those synonyms in mathematics all the way through. So those sorts of things will also be, you sort of pick those in Atlas as well later when necessary. So that's sort of how it all goes together. This is the end game. The end game is to be able to have one of these for the whole unit that makes sense. So how do I know my student is proficient in this unit? That question is answered by this sort of document.
So just to clarify, the proficiency scales that you did last week, or that you attempted, 2 weeks ago, and that I asked you to bring along today, they should look something along the lines of this, and then in the future, we're moving towards the whole unit proficiency scale. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. So as I said before, there's more detail in this chapter that I can give everyone before you leave today, but we really want to get this part right first before we move to the next stage.